Hello everyone, and welcome. Let's talk about global peace and geopolitics. Let me start by asking you, what does peace mean to you? Currently, major conflicts like the war between Russia and Ukraine are ongoing. In the United States, over 600 mass shootings are reported every year. It is quite concerning. Beyond global gun control, perhaps promoting peace through cultural exports, like broadcasting Japanese anime, such as Doraemon worldwide, might help. Instead of weapons, maybe the world needs hope, like the idea that even if you struggle academically or in sports, you can still find happiness and marry your dream partner. Though, ironically, that specific character is actually incredibly skilled with a gun. Now, war is a tragic phenomenon where humans divide into factions and destroy one another. And the ultimate weapon that completely disrupts this global playing field is the nuclear weapon. They are practically banned internationally, yet certain nations still hold them. We often hear about different countries possessing these nuclear arsenals, but where on earth are they actually hiding them? It makes you wonder, where could they be? In this video, we'll explore this exact question. We will dive deep into the geopolitics and strategic realities of warfare. Let's break down how this works. To understand this, we will focus on 3 key points. First, where nuclear weapons are hidden. Second, why the U.S. holds global dominance by controlling key choke points. Third, which nation will be the global leader in 100 years? Let's begin. First, let's look at which countries actually possess nuclear weapons. You might assume that any highly advanced technological nation possesses them. The declared nuclear states are the US, UK, France, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, and North Korea, with Israel highly likely to possess them as well. That makes 9 countries. Notice that even technologically advanced countries like Germany or Japan do not possess them. So possession is actually quite uneven among developed countries. These nuclear-armed nations share a common historical factor. Put simply, they are the victors of war. 5 of them are the victorious allies of World War II. The other 4, including India, only emerged as independent nations after the war. Indeed, nations like India and Pakistan gained independence from British colonial rule after World War II. They did not participate in the war as fully sovereign independent nations. Now, let's address the core question. Where do you think a country like the US hides its weapons? You might think of a highly visible location, but of course, it's not that simple. Normally, nuclear locations are kept strictly confidential, hidden where no one can easily find them. But why is such extreme secrecy necessary? It is to prevent adversaries from targeting them. If a conflict breaks out, the enemy's primary target will be these nuclear launch sites. If a nation can neutralize all of its opponent's nuclear assets in a first strike, it virtually wins. But how do you hide something as massive as a nuclear missile in the modern world? Today, hiding physical assets on Earth is incredibly difficult due to advanced satellite surveillance. Satellites monitor ground movements constantly, meaning land-based storage is highly vulnerable to detection. Active espionage also makes it nearly impossible to keep land locations a complete secret over time. So, the ideal hiding place must be invisible to satellites, and, even if detected, hard for adversaries to access. Does such a convenient place exist? Yes. It does. Deep beneath the ocean. But how do you hide them in the ocean? The answer lies in nuclear-powered submarines. The United States operates nuclear-powered submarines capable of remaining submerged deep underwater for months. Their primary mission is to remain undetected and, in the event of a crisis, stand ready to launch nuclear missiles. The coastlines on both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, the U.S. has vast oceanic areas to keep them hidden. So, the famous nuclear button we often see in movies is ultimately connected to these deep-sea submarines. In reality, simply possessing nuclear weapons is not enough. Their true strategic value lies in keeping them hidden. Considering these strict operational requirements, only 2 of the 9 nuclear-armed nations possess a truly robust triad. These 2 countries are the United States and Russia. Where does Russia hide its submarines? It is important to note that not just any ocean will do. Shallow waters allow satellite detection. The ideal location is a deep, safe sea that can be effectively patrolled and enclosed by one's own territory. Does Russia have access to such a sea? Yes, the Sea of Okhotsk. That is remarkably close to Japan. The Sea of Okhotsk has depths reaching 3,000 meters. Because of its enclosed shape, foreign submarines cannot easily enter. This is also a key reason why Russia is determined to maintain control over the Kuril Islands, northern territories. By controlling these islands, Russia can effectively enclose the Sea of Okhotsk and secure its naval bastion. As these hiding strategies show, modern international politics is heavily defined by naval supremacy. The United States retains its global dominance largely because it is the world's most powerful maritime nation. But what are the other benefits of maritime dominance besides deploying nuclear submarines? Let's move on to point 2. How the United States maintains its supremacy by controlling global choke points. The U.S. is considered the ultimate maritime power for 2 primary reasons. It effectively controls both global trade and communication networks through the oceans. Let's explain. First, let's look at trade. Roughly 90% of global trade is conducted by sea. Air freight accounts for only a tiny fraction of the total global volume. If a ship needs to carry cargo from country A to country B, can it take any route it wants? No. Due to fuel costs, navigation safety, and geography, shipping lanes are actually highly restricted. It turns out the oceans do have set paths rather than being completely open to free roaming. With no refueling stations in the open sea, ships cannot afford to take long, winding detours. For example, Japan imports the vast majority of its crude oil from the Middle East via tankers. These tankers must pass through the narrow Strait of Hormuz. Across the globe, there are several such critical narrow passages that maritime trade simply cannot bypass. These critical areas are known as choke points. So, because of weather, geography, and cost, shipping routes are tightly defined, and these sea gates exist. The remarkable thing is that the United States military monitors and secures almost all of these major choke points. To maintain this unrivaled naval presence, the U.S. invests tens of billions of dollars annually to deploy fleets worldwide. These choke points act as vital gates for global commerce, and the nation standing guard at these gates with unparalleled naval power is the U.S. If the U.S. were to close one of these gates, it would instantly disrupt global trade. Exactly. Blocking an adversary's imports can cut off their food and energy supply, halting their war effort. The most symbolic representation of this trade dominance is the status of the U.S. dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. Over 80% of global trade is settled in USD because of this underlying maritime security. But if the seas are contested, why not just use overland trade routes? While that sounds plausible, land routes present major challenges. First, high-capacity land transport infrastructure is highly limited. Land makes up only 30% of the Earth's surface, and much of it lacks the heavy transit infrastructure required for massive trade. Naturally, countries do not build massive cargo highways through uninhabited wastes. Second, land routes require crossing numerous international borders. Each border crossing introduces tariffs, complex regulations, customs delays, and political risks. In contrast, sea trade often requires passing through just 1 or 2 major international channels secured by maritime norms. So, switching entirely to land routes is rarely a viable alternative. Now, let's look at the second point. Controlling global communications. How does maritime dominance translate to controlling communication? Let's think about how data travels. When you send a message from one side of the world to an acquaintance on the other side, how does it get there? You might assume it travels wirelessly through the air or via Wi-Fi, but that is not how it works. Wireless signals cannot easily travel such vast distances across oceans. Radio signals degrade over long distances and cannot reliably span entire continents on their own. While satellites handle some traffic, 99% of global internet data actually travels through physical cables on the ocean floor. These are the undersea fiber optic cables. And the nation with the most extensive influence over the installation and security of these cables is the United States. Why are undersea cables so strategically important? Mainly because managing the infrastructure allows for potential signal monitoring and intelligence gathering. Intercepting communications is a highly effective way to learn strategic plans. Does that mean standard personal messages could theoretically be monitored? Technically, yes, if an intelligence agency chose to target them. Even though data is highly encrypted, modern decryption capabilities are advanced. For instance, reports previously revealed that U.S. intelligence had monitored the communications of top foreign leaders. While highly controversial, preventing such monitoring is exceptionally difficult in practice. Essentially, just like with physical trade, the U.S. influences the very pathways through which global information flows. In a world where both physical goods and digital data must cross oceans, controlling these sea lanes is crucial. This explains why maritime power remains the ultimate key to global influence. Does this mean the United States will hold this dominant position forever? That brings us to point 3. Who will be the global leader in 100 years? It is impossible to say for certain, especially with the rise of China as a major competitor. What is the core of the geopolitical tension between the U.S. and China? While there are many specific disputes, structurally, the U.S. is the premier maritime power, while China is the premier land power. Does tension naturally exist between land and sea powers? Historically, yes. Geopolitical theorists have long noted this rivalry. Maritime nations thrive on trade, fisheries, and naval strength. Land powers, on the other hand, historically expanded through territory, agriculture, heavy industry, and large land armies. Their structural characteristics are fundamentally different. Looking back at history, global dominance has repeatedly shifted between land and sea powers. Up until the 15th century, dominant empires were primarily land-based. Because navigation was primitive, land transport and armies determined power. An obvious example is Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. However, the 15th and 16th centuries brought advancements in shipbuilding, leading to the Age of Discovery. During this era, maritime nations like Spain and Portugal rose to prominence. This was the period when European powers began establishing global colonial networks across the oceans. Then, in the 19th and 20th centuries, the rise of railways revolutionized overland transit. This development re-energized land powers like Germany and Russia. This period saw the rise of massive continental states. And today, modern technology and power projection keep the U.S. at the helm. So, will the next era favor land powers once again? It remains an open question. Will global influence be decided on land or at sea? While the oceans are vast, uninhabited land areas like the Arctic and Antarctic still hold untapped potential. And of course, we must not overlook the final frontier, outer space, which remains largely unexplored. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, and check out the videos on the end card to keep exploring how the world really works.